Hi, and welcome to History You Did Not Know But Should. My name's Ray.
I'm Chris.
And today we're going to be looking at the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge in North Carolina. We're going to be looking at four specific things. First, the events that led up to the battle, a little bit about the battle itself, some notable figures that come out of the battle, and also the general importance of Moores Creek. So let's go ahead and get started, Chris. If you want to go ahead and start us by talking about some of the events leading up to the battle at Moores Creek Bridge.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating because, we're located here at Bladen Community College, and Moores Creek is not too far from us. And it's fascinating to know that in February of 1776, North Carolina, right here in our area, was basically a hot mess. It was full of a diverse group of people who were not all interested in the exact same thing. For instance, we had a group of people that were in this area that were known as loyalists, which meant that they were loyal to the king, that they were not sold on this concept of independence and breaking away from Mother England because they were unsure of how things might be. And so you had a group of loyalists that were just kind of wanting to maybe work things out. But then on the other hand, you had a group of patriots who were determined and were driven that the way to go was to declare independence and to remove oneself from the perils of problems in Great Britain. And so right here at Moores Creek, you basically see this collision that happens that in a way starts the ball for independence really becoming more of just talk, but of action.
Yeah, and I think if we look at some of these groups that were involved in the Patriot cause and also in the Loyalist cause, I think one of the groups we have to talk a little bit about are the Highland Scots. Of course, many of the Highland Scots came into the Wilmington area. Some of them went north, ended up in Bladen County, Cumberland County. Of course, in Cumberland County, we think about Cross Creek, which is now modern-day Fayetteville. And when we think about the things leading up to the Battle of Moores Creek, you think about, we talk about in class, we talk about the Stamp Act and the tea tax and all of these things. I think from my understanding is a lot of these Highlanders living, for example, in Cumberland County weren't necessarily directly impacted by a lot of this, though the Stamp Act probably did affect them more than others. But a lot of these people were sort of, they weren't directly impacted by these things. And many of the Scott Highlanders, when they had came from Scotland, had faced persecution by the king. They had faced hardship by the king. So some people ask, well, why in the world are these people turning out to be loyalists at this time? And I think there are four basic reasons. Number one is by the time you get to 1774, 75, 76, a lot of these Scottish Highlanders, the Prime Minister William Pitt had really worked to sort of bridge the differences between the two, sort of bring about some reconciliation. Of course, they always feared reprisals of the British, and we will look at, by the end of this particular podcast, some of the things that did happen to them after Moores Creek Bridge. Of course, Governor Josiah Martin, who was the last royal governor of North Carolina, he's going to offer a lot of them land. And of course, they're loyal to him and to the king because they fear losing the land. And then, of course, some of these people were retired military officers by that time as well. So they're also recruited quite heavily by the British. General Gage sends down 2 military officers to North Carolina to recruit Highlanders into military units. This is Brigadier General Donald McLeod and Colonel Donald McLeod. These are the two who were sent down to North Carolina to really recruit some of these Highlanders to that cause. Anything else you want to say about the?
Yeah, I think you've made some good points. And isn't it interesting that, a lot of times we read in the textbook, or we read in a book, or we teach students about all of these things that are going on in Massachusetts, but we have to recognize that word is traveling. And so you've got down here the Scott Irish that you've mentioned, but also this other group of loyalists who are saying, wait a second, this isn't how America is supposed to be. This isn't about the American freedom and the American dream that we were promised of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then on the other hand, you have this loyalist who are saying these people are acting like rebellious children, and it needs to be stopped, and it needs to be stopped immediately. So I think it is so important that we have to look at the entire context of what is happening in February 1776 to understand that one event does matter to another event. And so you have these loyalists who decide to make a stand. I'm going to teach the patriots a lesson. And so they, whether it's coming up through Wilmington or it's going to be coming through Fayetteville, but there is this plan that they are going to engage this rowdy group of patriots. And on February the 27th, we have that battle that starts to take place. And what I found to be interesting is thinking about the preparation in the battle of the patriots. I mean, because honestly, who were the patriots? We mentioned a little bit about who they were in name, but in reality, were they warriors? Were they soldiers? Or what were their occupations?
Well, I think a lot of the patriots, just like a lot of the loyalists when we talk about the Highlanders, and I do want to make clear that not all Highlanders were loyalists. Some were patriots. They were divided pretty much like everybody else was divided. But I think a lot of these people were just regular folks. I mean, these were people who took up arms to fight for a cause, whether it be to defend the king's honor and defend the government and to defend the status quo, or whether it was to try to overturn, the status quo. I think a lot of these people were just farmers and shopkeepers and teachers and loyalists. Patriots. Some patriots were loyal. No. Anyway, but you get what I'm saying. They were just regular, ordinary, everyday people.
So we have these two groups that are preparing to meet. The loyalists are going to try to cut through to Wilmington so that they can join up with a larger force of British soldiers and really complete the mission of proving once and for all that North Carolina should be supporting the king and the king's initiative. And so as they're making their way to Wilmington, they come to a spot here in North Carolina known as Moore's Creek, and they start to sense that this isn't going to be just a simple journey to meet up with other forces that are supporting them, but that they are going to come across a group of patriots, and not just a group of patriots who just decide to show up and fight, but a group of patriots who really prepare to dig themselves in for a major battle. And I thought it was interesting. And if you go to Moore's Creek, you can kind of see how they built themselves in and kind of the mounds that they used. And as we just mentioned, these were not dedicated soldiers. These were people whose everyday life was farming or it was tailoring, but they understood the calls and they were willing to learn quick on how to prepare oneself for battle and also to be willing to sacrifice. So I also thought it was interesting that when some of the loyalists saw the presence of the patriots and what they were about to enter, that even some of the loyalists said, I'm not into this. This is not for me. I think I'm going to head on out. Y'all handle it.
Yeah, I mean, I just imagine, in the evening before the 27th, between the 26th and 27th that night, and going into the early morning hours of February 27, these people, I'm talking here about the loyalists who've come down from Cumberland County, what is Cross Creek at the time. And like you said, they're on their way to Brunswick to meet up with larger British forces. And I think, they're walking in a territory they're completely unfamiliar with. And it had to be a very unsettling experience for many of these people.
So they get to the bridge. And in Moore's Creek, and they get to the bridge, and as they get to the bridge, the loyalists see that on the other side looks like there's some patriot pickets that have been established. Looks like some kind of defense has been set up. But I think the problem is that it's dark, right? Because this is happening in the middle of the night. Yeah,
it's dark. It's early in the morning. It's dark. They had actually right before going to the bridge, the loyalists had come across campfires that had been left by some patriots. Of course, it was just an empty camp with fires, sort of as a diversion. And of course, the patriots had also taken the bridge, taken the planks up from the bridge, and wiped the sections that were still there down with soap so they would be slippery. So the Loyalists are approaching this bridge. They start working to cross it, and of course they see a person, a sentry of some sort, standing on the other side of the bridge, and they call out to this person, are you a friend or are you an enemy? And the person is very evasive in his answers. And of course, shots are fired right there. And it's shortly after that McLeod and his other Loyalist forces try to rush across the bridge. Of course, trying to scale that bridge, they wouldn't have been rushing.
And what's fascinating about this is a moment in history that we remember. There is a battlefield. There is this place we can go to and we can recall the events and all that happened. But in essence, the actual battle only lasted, maybe 2 minutes to 5 minutes? I mean, this is not some long, drawn-out affair. No. It is a quick skirmish that has monumental impact. Because
once the loyalists who were able to cross that bridge, once they crossed that bridge, and I don't know if you've ever, and I know you've been there, but I don't know if our listeners have ever been there. It's not that far from where that bridge ends to where the Patriots and Richard Caswell and his men were sort of held up, waiting with two massive cannons. One of these cannons was called Old Mother Covington and her daughter, these huge cannons that were there, just waiting on them to cross. And of course, these things are lit and the muskets fire. And these people, as soon as they cross that bridge, it's showtime. There's not a lot of prep.
And the remaining legacies of this is not only of the victory that was established by the Patriots per se, but what we also start finding out with this is that this quick Patriot victory will not only give the Patriots a moral boost. I mean, here they are saying, hey, we were able to defeat the Loyalists. I mean, the King's army. We have been victorious. And not only that, but in about 5 minutes, we were that victorious. But that this will also allow the opportunity for North Carolina to finally establish themselves as saying, we're going to be independent.
Yeah, just a few weeks later, April 12, 1776, Halifax resolves. North Carolina becomes the first colony really to call for independence, to where it's calling for, we're going to be a free and independent state.
So amazing. Think about this. A 5-minute battle.
Yeah.
Kind of out of the blue, really, right? And it creates North Carolina being the first colony to say, we're done with England. And I just think that is the beauty of history. That you have these opportunities, what might be seen as insignificant, what might be seen as just a small skirmish, turns into the Halifax Resolve, which gets North Carolina saying we're done, but then that forces the other colonies to say, well, we're done as well. Remember, February, we're now talking about April. It will not be long before July 4th comes about, July 3rd, where we all of a sudden see a nation that has decided to be united in the separation from England. So what I find fascinating is that right here in our neck of the woods, at a small little bridge with a small group of patriot soldiers, they truly changed the course of American history.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Henry Lee, I think it was June 7, 1776, does propose in the Second Continental Congress, he does propose, independence, and ultimately, like you said, July 4 and all of that. And North Carolina was ahead of them. I mean, North Carolina here in April is calling for independence from Great Britain. So that's why we see First in Freedom on the license plate. North Carolina was the first state in the Union at that time to call for independence.
And here's another thing that I think is great about Morris Creek. And I invite our listeners to truly take time to go out to Morris Creek, to take a look at it and to see all that is out there and to just imagine, what was going on as you think about this 5-minute skirmish. But over there at Morris Creek, there is also another monument. And that monument that is there is known as the Morris Creek National Women's Monument, which was dedicated in 1907 to honor the women of the lower Cape Fear region who were contributors to the Patriot cause. So often we forget
Yes.
that the Patriots were not a group of men necessarily, but the Patriots were a group of people who were united to the cause, and that it is the people of the lower Cape Fear region, the people that were birthed here, that died here, that lived here, that sacrificed here. It is these individuals that truly made long-lasting contributions to the American Revolution.
Yeah, and I know there's a particular woman you have done some research on, and you've actually written for the college on it.
Yeah,
her. Sorry.
I love the story. I call her a forgotten hero. And we mentioned Caswell. We mentioned Moore.
Yeah.
We talk about even Lillington was there, right? And so all of these have their names. Lillington, North Carolina. You've got Moore County. You've got Caswell County. We've got all of these names. But there's a forgotten hero whose name was Polly or Mary Slocum. She went by the nickname Polly Slocum. And what I find out that is fascinating about her is that she was a brave and dedicated revolutionary figure during the American Revolution. She had a significant impact, not just at Morris Creek, but also just in general. But one of the things that I wanted to share with you and with our listeners about her is that she played such a role at the Battle of Morris Creek. And her husband was in the militia. He was a patriot, and he was headed off to battle. And that night, Polly had a vision. She had a dream, and in that vision, she saw a body that was wrapped in her husband's cloak, and that the body was bloody. And so she all of a sudden thought, oh my gosh, my husband is dead. My husband is severely injured in this battle. And so she woke up in the middle of the night. She got on a horse, and she took off. And in the middle of the night, she headed off to go to Morris Creek, and she rides for about 30 miles. She comes to Morris Creek. She hears the thunder of cannon, as you already mentioned, and she goes to where the guns have been fired, and she finds about 20 individuals lying on the ground. And it's dark, and it's mist, and it's hard to see, but she goes to this one body that was wrapped in her husband's cloak. She uncovers the head. She sees that there's a face that's covered in blood. It's got a head wound, and the soldier is crying out for water. And at that moment, she recognizes it's not her husband. And so she takes care of that guy. So instead of going off and searching for her husband and saying, well, you're not my guy, I've got to go find my husband, she helped that soldier. And then she moved to another soldier and helped, and another soldier and helped. And after checking to make sure he was okay and the others were okay, then she came to find out whether or not her husband was safe and was secure. And then she got on a horse once the husband was okay, and she went back home to make sure that her son knew that she would be there when the morning came up. And so I think that when you start studying history and you start recognizing that these were ordinary people who truly made a difference, and Mary's just one of them.
Yeah.
You know others that are out there who had a significant impact.
Yeah, I mean, there are other women throughout the American Revolution who have, done the same type of thing she's done, and the soldiers in the American Revolution, even in the North, Washington's army, they had women following them. Some of those were nurses and cooks and did other things like that. So women played a very important role in the American Revolution. One of the people I think we need to look at or talk a little bit about Richard Caswell. He's one of the Patriot leaders at this point. He leads around 1,000 Patriots in Morris Creek battle. But who is he? I mean, this is a man who later becomes the first and fifth governor of the new state of North Carolina once the nation has set up the Constitution and North Carolina becomes a state and all that kind of stuff. So like you said, there are a lot of people who come out of Morris Creek Bridge battle that later become very significant people.
Yeah, and I go back and I just think about the beauty of history and the importance of history. You think about when we are recording this podcast, that we are seeing young people and older people. We're seeing educated and uneducated. Everybody is rising up, starting to recognize the importance of history. And what we need to always remember is that there is history right here in our own backyard. And that the history in our backyard is full of stories of Caswell, Slocum, of others who stood up for what they believed in, who made a difference, who sacrificed.
And some of them, and not all of them, were patriots. Some of them were loyalists. I mean, you think about people I mentioned earlier, Donald McLeod. He is killed at the Battle of Moores Creek very early on, but he's a loyalist. He's a Scott Highlander. He's a loyalist. He's someone, though, who does die there trying to, defend his version of what he thought North Carolina should be. So not all the heroes of Moores Creek or in these other battles, not all of these heroes are patriots. Some of them are loyalists. And if you go to Moores Creek and you go to their yearly, I think it's usually in February, not sure what it's going to look like in February 2021, but if you go to their not necessarily reenactment, it's more of a demonstration, they take a moment to recognize the patriot fallen, but also take a moment to recognize the loyalist fallen, because these people were all North Carolinians who just simply had a different perspective on what was going on and what they wanted the future of the colony, i.e. state, to be.
So we find as we close out this podcast, talking about battle at Moores Creek, that there is so much that we can learn from a beautiful place in which a group of individuals, whether loyalists or patriots, they stood for what they believed in. They fought for what they believed in. They sacrificed for what they believed in. They were willing to die for what they believe in. And it is a reminder to us that we must continue to carry on the legacies of standing up for what we believing in, speaking out on what we believe in, and doing it in a way to ensure that the legacy will not be about us, but it is always about the cause for what we are pushing and promoting. I'm thankful for Moores Creek, and I invite our listeners to take time and to go out there. Beautiful trails, beautiful park, plenty of information, but just a wonderful time to get out and to recognize that this place right here had the opportunity and took it and made a difference in American history.
Absolutely. And I think just to close things out, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier how much history is literally in our backyard. We're sitting here on the campus of Bladen Community College today, nice sunny day, a nice day to be on campus. But when you think about the history that surrounds us, Charles Cornwallis marching from the Guilford Courthouse to Wilmington, and some of the Battle of Elizabethtown, which of course we're going to talk about next time on the next podcast. There's just so much history all around us, and so many times we're just too busy to recognize it. So I think this has been a good podcast, sort of an overview of Moores Creek. Like I said, next time we do want to look at the Battle of Elizabethtown, sort of continuing to look at some of these smaller Revolutionary War battles. Though they were smaller, they were still influential, that occurred here in southeastern North Carolina, not too many moons ago.
And so much fun. Thank you for getting together again as we talked about the Battle of Moores Creek. We want to invite our listeners, if there is a subject or a topic you would love for us to discuss, please reach out to us. We love talking about history, and we want to share that with you, and want to give a special thanks out to Miss Jeannie Butler, who is our sound engineer.
Our sound engineer and technology guru.
Yes, she is great.
Makes us look like we know what we're doing.
Absolutely. So thank you, Miss Jeannie. And for all of you out there who have taken time to listen, we truly appreciate you. Thank you so much for allowing us to come into your world to share with you some of the things in our world that give us great joy.
That's right. And we'll see you next time on History You Did Not Know But Should.